Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in on your computers, laptops, and handheld devices to hear the latest information about the Anderson Dam Seismic Retrofit Project. I'm Melanie Richardson, Valley Water's Chief Operating Officer for Watersheds, and I'm going to be acting as your MC for tonight's virtual meeting. Before we start, though, we're going to do just a little Zoom meeting housekeeping. And for that, I'm going to turn it over briefly to Albert Lee. Okay, thank you very much, Albert. Appreciate that. And I'm joined here tonight by our Chief Executive Officer, Norma Camacho, and also Director John Varela, who represents this area. In addition to that, several of his board colleagues are on the call, and Director Varela will be introducing them when he speaks. In addition, we also have several Valley Water staff on the call. Before we get into the presentation on our project, our CEO, Norma Camacho, would like to share some opening remarks. Norma has led Valley Water since 2017, and she recently announced her retirement. We have been grateful for her leadership and welcome her to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Melanie, and good evening, everyone, for making it to this meeting. I would also like to express my gratitude to those who are joining us in this virtual format and to our staff that has made this meeting possible. And being able to connect with all of you, even during these challenging times, really reinforces our commitment to provide you meaningful information about the project and address your concerns while still keeping you safe through social distancing. And again, we've reiterated it many times, but the Anderson Dam Seismic Retrofit Project is our priority, as is our commitment to ensure the health and safety of our community. We've heard from many people in the community over the last few months, especially with news regarding the directive from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, known as FERC. And as you all know, they have directed us to begin the dewatering of Anderson Dam by October 1st of 2020. And tonight, you're going to hear about that process from our team and also hear about the potential impacts this work will have on the environment, wildlife habitat in Coyote Creek, as well as local recreation and water quality impacts. This is going to be a very large-scale effort, but I have confidence in our staff and our partners at the local, state, and federal level that the project will be completed in a manner that protects all residents of Santa Clara County. And in closing, I'd really like to thank you all for the privilege of serving as the CEO for Valley Water. And I will then turn the MC or the mic back to Melanie to continue the meeting tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Norma. Appreciate that. Now I would like to introduce Director John L. Varela, who represents this community as part of District 1 on the Valley Water's Board of Directors. Director Varela was appointed to the board in 2015 and re-elected in 2018. He has deep ties to this city, having served as a council member and mayor. We appreciate his time and ask that you welcome him here tonight. Director Varela.
Thank you, Melanie. Appreciate the introduction. And hello, everybody. Again, I am John Varela. I am your representative on the board of directors for Valley Water. And I want to thank you for the continued interest in the Anderson Dam Seismic Retrofit Project and for logging on to be part of this virtual presentation. I hope you all are continuing to stay safe and during these challenging and unprecedented times. Don't forget to wear your mask and keep that social distance. It's very important. I would like to recognize some of our elected representatives who have, by representation, been able to join us tonight. And tonight we will have also on this virtual meeting will be Sandra Soto and Priscilla Kim from Representative Zoe Lofgren's office, in addition to Kevin Fox and Lakeisha Bryant from Representative Khanna's office. And also, I'd like to announce the rest of the board of directors from the Santa Clara Valley Water District who are also joining me tonight. And they are Barbara Keegan, representing District 2, Richard Santos, who is not here, but I want to represent him as well because he's a very important part of the board of directors. Linda Lazat, who is representing District 4. Nai Shweya, who is our current board chair, representing District 5. Tony Estremera, Director Estremera is vice chair. He represents District 7. And Gary Kremen, who is on the road to Chicago, has just crossed the Continental Divide, and he represents District 7. So I want to thank you all and enjoy this opportunity to be in front of you. Also joining us tonight is Mr. Spencer Jones, who is representative of Assembly Member Robert Rivas, who represents District 30 in the California State Assembly. I appreciate the presence of our elected officials here tonight. As many of you know, I served this community as a council member and mayor. So I have a special connection to the city of Morgan Hill, and I empathize with those of you who have questions and have waited so long for this project to move forward and to express project that we're going to speak to you about tonight. We at Valley Water take our charge to address the reliability and safety of the dam seriously. And that effort will kick off later this fall with the drawing down of Anderson Reservoir so we can construct a new outlet tunnel to more reliably and quickly draw down the reservoir if needed. The overall project will help us to restore capacity and improve reliability, increase the wall height of the concrete spillway, and increase the height of the dam crest. Our staff has prepared an in-depth presentation that will go more into detail about our upcoming plans. Thank you again for joining us from your homes. We look forward to sharing project information and answering your questions. At this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Spencer Jones, who is representing Assemblymember Robert Rivas. Mr. Spencer, Chief of Staff for Assembly Rivas, who is the author of AB 3005, a very important bill which will expedite the Anderson project. Mr. Spencer.
Yes, thank you, Director Varello, and thank you, CEO Camacho. The Assembly member sends his apologies. He couldn't be here this evening, but as everyone has said, this project is a big priority for him, and he is proud to author a bill pending currently in the Assembly that would allow for the expedited start of the project finally. The bill is a priority for us, and that's because of the significant public safety issue that has already been mentioned. And that public safety issue was really hammered home all the more in that directive that came down from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, from FERC, in February. In that directive, it said, and it was quoted, that the Anderson Dam safety risk is, quote, unacceptably high. The risk at this project to downstream life and property is extreme. A catastrophic dam failure could potentially affect tens of thousands of people. Decisions must be made with public safety being the paramount factor. And it continues, it says, we must work with all haste to design and secure the necessary permits and complete the design for the rehabilitation or retrofit to the dam. So that really doesn't leave any question as to the public safety issue here, and that this bill and this project need to be a priority for all of us. So Assemblymember Rivas jumped in, has been working, over this past year with a great team from Valley Water, Barb Broom, Rachel Gibson, and others, has been working with local officials, including the mayor of Morgan Hill, Rich Constantine, and has been happy to secure a lot of regional support for the bill, given the public safety issue. And want to call out the co-authors on the bill, which include Assembly Members Berman, Chu, Gallagher, and Kalra. and also Senators Beal, Caballero, Hill, Monning, and Nielsen. In addition to that state support, we've received also a good degree of support from our federal elected officials, and a special thanks especially to Congressman Ro Khanna and also Zoe Lofgren for all that they've done to help with the bill and with getting this project started. So like I said, a lot of support, but it's a complicated bill. When it was referred out to committee here in the Assembly, it was said to touch 5 different committees' jurisdiction. And that's super rare and exceptional. Usually bills, will only be referred to 1 or maybe 2 committees. So very complicated. So we've been working very hard to get the support, to answer the questions, to amend the bill as necessary. And thankfully, despite COVID-19 and the atypical and exceptional year that this has become at the legislature, we've been able to still get traction with the bill, and in fact, get it heard just a couple of weeks ago in committee, in policy committee, where Assembly member presented and spoke very passionately about the public safety and water supply issue. I encourage you to search out his presentation remarks, his speech. It should be loaded shortly to our website and also on our Facebook page. But yeah, he was able to present. Mayor Constantine also spoke. And we were really grateful to get a bipartisan, unanimous vote coming out of that committee. It was 14-0. There's several steps left in the legislative process, but we feel like momentum is behind us. And like I said, we have a great team, and we will continue to work hard to press this forward as quickly as we can. In addition to support from other members and at the federal level, we certainly also need support from the community, from the public. Letters from you, calls and communications are noticed by the committee, by other members. And as we gear up to head to a floor vote in a couple of weeks, now really is the time for you guys to register that public support. And to sort of tell you how best to do that, we try to make it as easy as possible. I'm going to hand it over to Rachel Gibson.
Great, thank you so much, Spencer. Again, my name is Rachel Gibson. I'm the Director of Government Relations for Valley Water. Spencer mentioned we have built up a pretty decent groundswell of support at all levels, but really community support is what's really going to get us over the finish line here. So what I'd like to do, for those of you who'd like to get a sample letter of support that you yourself could write into the state legislature, and also to sign up to receive action alerts as the bill is making its way through the legislative process, if you go to the Zoom chat function, you can see the website where you can do both of those things. We've got a very simple link, and I'll state that link actually for those of you that don't have access to the chat box or would just rather listen. That link is valleywater.org/Anderson-Dam-Project. So I'll say that again, valleywater.org/Anderson-Dam-Project. So right at the top of that page, you can just click on that link and sign up to, again, not just to get that sample letter of support that is going to be so critical to getting this bill over the finish line, but also action alerts as this bill makes its way through the process. Spencer mentioned that we made it out at first committee, but that's by no means the end. We do need the community's help, and it's really going to be critical to making sure that this bill is successful. So with that, I'd like to thank Spencer and Assemblymember Rivas for their leadership on the bill, and certainly our own board members for their leadership in pursuing this as well. It is the board's highest priority, and we're anxious to get this done. With that, I'll turn it back to Melanie. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Director Varela and Mr. Jones. On behalf of Assemblymember Rivas, we are very, very grateful for both of your work on this project. I'd now like to turn things over to Chris Hakes, our Deputy Operating Officer in the Dam Safety Division, who will conduct the presentation with support from our staff. And the staff that will be available are our Senior Project Manager, Bal Ganju, Dam Safety Program Manager, Hamong Desai, Environmental Services Manager, Kurt Lunenberger, Deputy Operating Officer, Vincent Jen, and Assistant Officer, Rochelle Blank. After our presentation, we will be answering questions from the public that were sent to us prior to the meeting. We will also be able to address any questions for our virtual audience. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chris.
Thank you, Chief Richardson. I'm going to share my screen here and turn my video off in an attempt to save bandwidth, and hopefully this will all work. Let's see here. We'll start the slideshow. And 1 second. Stop video. Okay, here we go. So I'm here to talk about the Anderson Dam seismic retrofit project update, and specifically what we've done as a response to the letter that was written to us by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, on February 20th, 2020. So we're going to go ahead and go. A while back, our board did a kind of top-down analysis of the Anderson Dam project to ensure that our goals were aligned with the mission of the district. Specifically, the Anderson Dam project has 4 goals: public safety, and that is the top priority, and it's to expeditiously complete the project. I won't read you all the text, but basically, we want to make sure the community is maintained in a safe manner, and that basically the dam is retrofit in a timely fashion. Water supply is also obviously a concern for the district. This is our largest reservoir in the county. It can actually fit the other 9 reservoirs that the district has for groundwater recharge within it. So we do want to maintain the level that we currently have, as well as restore the capacity that was previously there. We do realize that there's an environmental enhancement portion associated with the project, mainly because there's creek habitat downstream for endangered species. And the goal of the project is to leave the creek in a better condition than when we found it. So after the retrofit, we expect to have better habitat and more suitable species environment downstream of the dam. And finally, we want to do it in a financially sustainable manner. We're not opening a blank check. No one has unlimited funds. We're looking to conduct the project in a sustainable manner that actually looks at the cost and does what's necessary to protect all of the public safety, water supply, and environmental components while doing it in a fiscally judicious manner. This is the existing Anderson Dam. You see it has a spillway, an outlet pipe that runs directly under the center of the dam that's kind of undersized as it is now. The dam crest, which is the top of the dam, and the dam embankment. It's an earthen embankment, which means basically you've got rock and dirt above a core of clay. The clay is impenetrable for the water, and that's really what holds the water back. And then the dirt and rock are what kind of filters out the water as it goes to the dam face. As part of the project, we are going to replace several components, and some of you may have questions about why the project takes as long as it has. When it was originally conceived, it was only a 3-year project. And that's because we were only going to buttress, which is place more material on the left side of this purple picture. That's the typical dam seismic retrofit. You're just kind of putting more material to help during an earthquake. But we found out in 2016, the project started in 2012, but we found out in 2016, when we were already about 30% along with the design of the buttressing, that the embankment, that purple area that you see, had additional potential to liquefy. That basically means during an earthquake, the embankment turns, for lack of a better word, something like jello and starts to sag. So in 2016, the project was vastly expanded, became about twice as big, and we had to remove the entire embankment, keeping our clay core, but reconstructing the entire embankment. The next kind of twist was in 2017. Originally, the project was just going to patch and fix the existing spillway. However, after Orville and the extremely wet year in 2017, the Department of Safety of Dams, which is a part of the California Department of Water Resources, changed the design criteria for spillways. As a result, we need to completely replace our spillway. We are always going to put a low-level outlet pipe in. That is to divert water from directly under the embankment. I told you we have an undersized tunnel that's currently there. That would be damaged during an earthquake if the embankment does liquefy. So we're now going around the embankment and around the abutment. So we have a low-level outlet pipe, a temporary diversion structure to drain the reservoir so we can construct, and as well as a high-level outlet pipe. The high-level outlet pipe is a new criteria put in place by DSOD, the Department of Safety of Dams, that allows us to rapidly drain the top third of the reservoir within 7 days. So those are obviously all advancements that were made since 1950 when the dam was originally constructed. One of the issues that did come up because of the construction period is when the dam was built in 1950, several agencies that now have jurisdiction did not exist. One of those is the National Marine Fisheries Service, NMFS. And basically, when we first approached the project under the direction of FERC, we were looking at only the impacts of actually removing the embankment and reconstructing it. And we were going to mitigate for that. Because NMFS is involved in the consultation and they're there to protect environmentally endangered species, specifically the steelhead that are in the area, they said that we need to look at the post-construction operation of this dam. As a result, the kind of area that we were analyzing expanded and is no longer just the dam itself, it is also the downstream area where the habitat is. That was the last expansion of the project in 2018. We were moving along with somewhere between a 5 and 7 year project when we did receive the notification from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission on February 20th that they viewed the dam as an unacceptably high risk to the downstream community. As a result, they did 6 main things. They gave us a revised restriction to elevation 565. Previously, our restriction had been elevation 592, which is about 58% of the capacity of the reservoir. At elevation 565, we're at about 35% capacity. We were also directed to take all necessary measures to safely prepare to drain the dam down to what we affectionately call dead pool. That's elevation 488. I've got some pictures to illustrate what dead pool is or isn't a little bit later. Dead pool does mean there is water in the reservoir, but it's the lowest level that we can mechanically drain the reservoir with the current outlet system that's in place. We are to begin draining the reservoir from elevation 565 to elevation 488 dead pool on October 1st. They have told us to do it in a safe manner, so we will be doing it in a gradual way so as not to harm either the creek channel, our water supply, or the environmental, the environmental animals, for lack of a better term, that are down there. We also are to develop a plan to maintain that elevation as storms come in. Because our pipe is so undersized for our outlet right now, we have to develop a kind of way that we intend to drain that in an effective manner. And here's the most important for, I think, what we're going to talk about tonight. We also have to expedite design and construction of the new outlet tunnel. The new outlet tunnel will allow us to better maintain the water reservoir level, and as a result, give us flexibility to, 1, potentially put water back into the reservoir sooner, and then 2, finish the project sooner. That's why they want the expedited design. And then 3, absolutely, I probably should have started with, minimize the risk to public safety. And then the final thing that the letter said was to secure the permits and complete the design of the overall seismic retrofit project. So tonight, we'll be talking about the FERC directive and what it means to the project. So our response to the directive was to ensure that we were immediately in compliance with the new reservoir level. We were already. During winter operations, we draw down the reservoir to create extra room so that an event like 2017 doesn't happen again. And we were already below the 565 elevation. I believe we were around 552 feet. We were to create the Anderson, or we created the Anderson Dam Tunnel Project, the ADTP, which is the expedited design and construction of the tunnel outlet. And then I believe it's the next slide, I'll kind of go over that. We also created the FERC Order Compliance Project, FOCP. This involves all of the elements that we were required to undertake to safely drain and maintain the reservoir operating level. So although the tunnel is an easily understandable item for construction, there are several things that need to be done to make sure that when the tunnel is operating and we are initially dewatering the reservoir, that there is no adverse impact to either the environment or water supply. So I'll touch on a couple of those, but basically it's a suite of projects that we're doing to ensure that their impacts from the tunnel construction and use are mitigated. And the last thing is, just last Tuesday, 2 days ago, our board of directors did approve the project description for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission FERC Order Compliance Project. The preliminary project description describes at a very high level all of the different project elements that we're speaking about tonight. I believe there are actually 10 distinct project elements covering 4 separate categories. And if you'd like, all of our meetings are recorded, so you may go back and look, or we have posted the project description to our website, If you'd like more detail on that at any time, you can obviously check out our website to get additional information. So the FOCP, what is part of the FERC order compliance project? We are obviously initially lowering the reservoir. We were already in compliance. So the first action we will take is lowering it from elevation 565, which we're already under, down to elevation 488. That will begin in October. Those are the first two items there. And then we have a little graphic where all of a sudden the water disappears and we're down to dead pool. As you can see, dead pool does mean that there is water in the reservoir. There's about 2,300 acre feet out of the 90,000 acre foot capacity still in there. So when you look at the reservoir, you will see some water in there. However, because we cannot actually drain that water through our intake structure, it tends to become very hot in summer, as well as low in dissolved oxygen. It's affectionately referred to as dead pool because it is a dead pool of water that we cannot move out, that becomes environmentally unfriendly for native species or any species, frankly. The second half of the FERC order compliance project is the Anderson Dam Tunnel project. I had said that we will be expediting construction of the tunnel. We did submit a plan to FERC on March 20th for design and construction of the tunnel. Right now it is scheduled to begin construction in early 2021. Sooner is always better, so we are moving along to see how quickly we can get that out the door. The tunnel construction itself is somewhere between 18 and 24 months, and then there'll be an operational period a little bit after that where we kind of roll the tunnel's operation into service. The other measures that I spoke about, which kind of form the FOCP, we'll be doing downstream flood protection mitigation to Coyote Creek, as we'll be releasing more flows through the tunnel about 3 years after construction starts. We expect that we need to have that creek in a condition to where we're not inducing flooding. We will also be doing monitoring of the embankment and outlet. The existing outlet is the most critical element of the dam as it stands right now. So we're going to want to monitor that all during construction to make sure no damage comes about it before the existing or the new outlet is online. We will also enact all necessary mitigation measures to minimize the impact to water supply and environmental impacts. Basically, we have always known that Anderson Reservoir will be out of service from a water supply perspective. It's happening a little bit sooner than we had anticipated, but that's not a bad thing. We are in good shape from a groundwater basin perspective. We have plenty of water to suit what we need for the years coming, and we are making great strides looking just to make sure our portfolio is diversified enough that we'll be able to handle the water supply demands of the county. So what does dewatering actually look like? This was the last time we dewatered the reservoir was 1987. This was actually taken all the way down to the bottom of the reservoir. This was so we could install the existing inlet-outlet system. As you can see, basically all the water is gone. It's fairly muddy down there. This is not what will happen during the Anderson Dam Tunnel project. After the tunnel project is completed and we go into the overall seismic retrofit, you can expect to see a picture that's more like this. We will need to totally drain the reservoir after year about 3 or 4 in order to completely redo that embankment. What it does mean is, although you see a little trickle of water here, and you'll probably see a bigger trickle of water when we are doing the Anderson Dam Tunnel project, there will still not be enough water for boating. That's a question that comes up at most of our meetings, is what's the impact to boating from these projects? For the Anderson Dam Tunnel project, the impact to boating will mean boating will be completely restricted. We will not have a water base for anyone to actually boat in. Just to talk about what the different hurdles are to get the project done, FERC has done the legwork to issue an emergency declaration in response to the directive that they gave us on February 20th. As a result, the federal agencies have all acknowledged emergency consultation procedures for this project. So they're expediting their urgent consultation, and we're dealing with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the National Marine Fisheries Service. So all of those entities have acknowledged the kind of emergency nature of what we're doing and have kind of streamlined our consultation to make it happen before we actually have to drain or start constructing the tunnel. At the state level, we're working with the Department of Safety of Dams, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Valley Habitat Agency, State Water Resources Control Board, as well as the region, and the State Historic Preservation Officer. They also recognize the, I would say, urgency of this action. And as you heard, we have State Bill 3005 in the works right now. Everyone is working to get a urgent consultation done. We're in that process, but basically there are a lot of agencies involved. So as you can see, it is a heavy lift. We also do have, of course, local approvals, working with the City of Morgan Hill, as well as encroachment and hauling rights. To talk about what the construction sequence actually looks like, the scope of the project has kind of expanded. It's like an accordion. It's gotten from smaller to longer. It's coming back to smaller. What we're focused on tonight is just the FERC order compliance project, which is the construction of the draining of the reservoir and the construction of the tunnel. You can see that's basically the first 3 years of the project. Years 4 through 9 are the removal of the embankment, the reconstruction of the spillway, the installation of the high-level outlet, and then ultimately the final outlet works on the low level. The issue becomes the schedule extended out to this duration, partially because the intent was to keep water behind the reservoir for as long as possible to minimize environmental impacts. Now that we are officially drained, if we were to stay in that configuration, the impacts will have already been incurred, and it might be possible to squeeze this schedule back down. We're looking at that right now. We expect that we will be discussing that possibility with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, but this was the last schedule that was adopted, so we're sticking to this until we hear otherwise from FERC. The flip side of a longer construction duration is if FERC actually says that we are able to put water back into the reservoir, we may be able to minimize the impacts to a water supply and environmental perspective, but it would take longer to construct. So that's basically why you've seen some give and take with our schedule and why it hasn't been finalized yet. We're still working with all the regulatory agencies to make sure that we find the best balance of public safety and environmental mitigation and avoidance. Schedule-wise, as you can see, the top portion is the Anderson Dam Tunnel Project. We're going out to construction in 2021. It says drain to elevation 488, and that is Deadpool, and the intent is to keep it drained right now because that is the direction that we have from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. As you transition down to the lower portion, you see that it remains drained, and we start dam construction. It says fully dewatered, which means we're even lower than elevation 488. If the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission deems it acceptable to put water back into the reservoir, 2024, you would actually see the water level rise above 488, but you might see the brown construction line down on the bottom lengthen out. We'll be working with FERC to talk about that and what the final schedule is, and I expect that perhaps by our next public meeting, we will have an updated schedule to share. That's the presentation. We'll pivot to questions and answers. And right now I am seeing that we do have one question from Jeffrey Wells. Is there any thought to use construction manager CG contract to help expedite the project? I believe he's talking about a CM at risk contract. And yes, we are, as part of the best value legislation that's going, AB 3005, looking at alternate construction methods beyond just design, bid, build. CM at risk is one of the methodologies that we are looking at to possibly enact on the project. Okay, so hopefully that was answered. And I will turn my camera back on and tell me if I start to stutter in any capacity. And I will stop the share. Stop sharing. Okay, there we go. Shall we pivot to the list of questions that were submitted beforehand? I'll look for some confirmation from either Jose, Tony, or Albert.
Chris, I think you can go ahead and do that.
Okay, I'm going to pull those up right now. Please bear with me. I think some of these questions will have been answered as part of the presentation, but I will go ahead and see if I can kind of recap rather quickly what we have here. Let's see, questions. Okay, question. What is the plan for dealing with the FERC direction to drain the reservoir? As I said, I think we've covered what our plan is through the slides. We'll be enacting the FERC order compliance project as well as the Anderson Dam Tunnel project. We are getting more questions in the Q&A, and I'll hit those in just a second. Question 2, will the new outlet be split off for quicker construction? And then yes, the Anderson Dam Tunnel project is the new low-level outlet, and it has been expedited. Originally, it was slated to start construction in 2022. We will be starting in 2021. So that is an affirmative to that question. Question 3, I believe that I heard the entire dam will need to be reconstructed. I assume this means the entire dam will need to be removed. Will there be any winters where the dam will be at partial height during construction? If so, what measures will be taken to prevent erosional failure if overtopping occurs? That kind of final question is actually like 4 questions in one. The entire dam will not be reconstructed. The clay core will remain in place. However, we will be removing the entire embankment, which is a significant portion of the dam. There will be some winters where the dam is at a lower height than it currently is. We are currently verifying the acceptable dam height with the Department of Safety of Dams and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. As we stop construction at any given year, we will winterize the site to ensure that erosion does not occur. So basically, those are kind of standard measures. They can basically encompass either geotextile fabric, armoring with rock, or even the installation of hydroseed to keep the slopes together. And I'll pivot now to the questions that are on the Q&A. I see about 8 questions. Any plan to maintain the perk ponds during the construction time period? So the answer to that is yes. We obviously use our perk ponds to recharge. Some perk ponds will go dry because they are fed by Anderson, but downstream of the creek, we do have the ability to recharge using what we call the CVP source, which is the Central Valley Project imported water. So I do expect that some of our perk ponds will be in use, even though the Anderson is out of commission. Question 2 from Kevin Bishop. Will there be any water flowing in Coyote Creek throughout the project, or will it be dry? I'll answer that as well. I believe a certain portion of the creek may be dry, but the intent is to provide a suitable habitat throughout construction, which means we are looking at alternate water sources to keep the creek wet. How much of the creek may go dry will probably depend on season, but ultimately we are looking at a way to bypass waters from what is the upper watershed and kind of around the dam or through the dam, or basically keep the downstream creek wet. As more information becomes available, we will definitely share that.
Hey, Chris, can I ask you to go back and forth between, because we have several hands that are raised, maybe we can go back and forth to give everybody. Yeah.
Sure. Are we looking at hands raised in chat, or are they actual questions that we want to take
You
out?
have hands raised, maybe someone can help to identify the hands for Chris. So I believe the first person you have is a Simon Rate. Maybe they can start with there.
Would someone like to read me Simon's question, or let him give the ability to?
Hi, Simon. I allowed you to unmute yourself. Go ahead and unmute yourself. All right, let's move on to the next question. Let's go with Swanee Edward.
Excuse me as I.
Go ahead, Swanee. You're clear to talk. We're having some technical difficulties on the user side here. Let's go with Chris Harrington. We're gonna enable your mic. Chris, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. All right, so doesn't seem like we're able to get those questions in. And so Simon and Swanee, Chris, can you submit your questions via the Q&A, if anything?
Okay, I will pivot back to Q&A until perhaps we resolve the questions on the chat function. Jeff asked, what, if any, damage or foundation concerns are there for the houses near the dam? Holiday Lakes, for instance. Right now, there are traditional landslides in the area of Holiday Lakes. We'll actually be monitoring the area prior to the start of drawdown. As we dewater the reservoir, we will be looking for movement. We are conducting surveys right now, doing a geotechnical analysis, and if it requires it, we will stabilize the area. So right now, we don't expect any significant movement, but if there is any, we will be there either to prevent, mitigate, or possibly repair damage as it's caused. Let's see. Question from H. Hall. Any plans to mitigate, save the fish in Anderson that will be killed and rot in the dead pool? Yes, we will be doing every effort to salvage as many of the native species and sensitive species that are in the area. At some point, there will be non-native species. If 1987 is any indication, what will happen is the reservoir level will draw down to an area where the fish will be plentiful and easy to catch. We'll basically let the public know at that point. People will fish to their heart's content. We'll try to get as many fish out as we can, and then the level will continue to drop, and then we'll have what we like to affectionately refer to as biomass, which is rotting dead fish. At that point, we will dispose of them off-site. Last time in 1987, we actually had to freeze the fish and then truck them off-site to a dump. We're still investigating what the best way to handle it is this time. The situation will be a little bit different. Last time we drained it down to the bottom. This time it's about 2,300 acre-feet. But we will be looking to save as many of the fish as we can. Jano asks, when will you settle the flood claims of flood victims for 2017? We are waiting. Unfortunately, I am not privy to those discussions. I believe that's a Coyote Creek issue. We do have some meetings for the Coyote Creek community scheduled for the near future. That might be an appropriate venue to ask that question. Unfortunately, I don't have the answer. Carol Sheets, why does it take 10 years to build a dam? Can we incentivize the contractors to complete this work quicker? Yes, we are absolutely looking at incentivizing contractors to complete the work quicker. As for why it takes 10 years to complete the dam, most of that is to limit impact. If there were no environmental regulations in place, the process would be much quicker. We would work through the winter. The creek would become muddy and the habitat would become foul. But really, we are an organization that has three main missions: water supply, flood protection, and environmental stewardship. We take those missions seriously, and balancing all of three of those together is why the project is currently about 10 years. We are trying our best to squeeze that down. We know that 10 years is an inconvenience, and we are trying to do what we can with the regulators involved to shorten the duration overall of the project. Question from J-Manny, I think. Where will the material come from to build the new dam? So the answer is we will actually take the material from the original source, which was the reservoir itself. There are borrow areas along the perimeter of the reservoir which have been identified to provide the necessary amounts of material necessary. Vanessa Clayton asks, will Coyote be drained to prevent overflowing during construction? The answer to that is we'll be maintaining Coyote as we normally do. The Coyote and Anderson reservoirs are actually one system, and basically they're operated as such. So with Anderson out of order, it is actually feasible to keep more water in Coyote. Right now the plan is to keep the operations for Coyote the same. We'll be releasing water in order to basically bypass around Anderson to possibly keep the creek downstream of Anderson wet, but Coyote will not be overflowing during this period of construction. Now, activation of the spillway is not an overflow, and I do want to make that clear. A lot of people, when they do see the spillway activate, think that the dam is overflowing or overtopping. That is not the case. All 10 of our reservoirs were actually designed to fill all the way up to the top, spill over the spillway, and maximize groundwater recharge. Like I said, because of the seismic restrictions, that hasn't been the case for most of our dams for the near term. But during the construction, we will make sure that there is no failure potential for Coyote from an overtopping event. Let's see, Gordy Smith. What effect will dewatering have in the water level in the creek? How will Valley Water work with local government in anticipation of effect on the homeless groups living in the creek? So the dewatering effect for the creek will be variable. During the winter months, when we're dewatering, you'll see about an extra 100 CFS, which is cubic feet per second in the creek. That's not a lot. It's not enough to create any sort of flooding downstream. And when it comes to the homeless population, most of them should probably be out of the path of harm. The only scenario which that could potentially cause an issue is if they're basically living right in the creek. There are some areas of some creeks that do dry off and create islands in the middle during the summer. You know, during winter, if they were still there, there could potentially be some impacts, but normally some of the homeless population is very resilient. They know the system and how it functions, and they tend to get out of the way when storm events come. That said, we will be partnering with the county and cities in the area to do our best to minimize impacts to the downstream community, whether they be homeowners or homeless. The intent of the project is a public safety project, and we do not want to endanger any individuals from conducting the project. Let's see, I think JSIT is the next question. Is the structural engineer on this project done in-house, or is it done by a third party? The structural engineering is actually done by our consultants, AECOM. They're a multinational firm that is very well known, and they are providing structural engineering on the project. Omar, could you please comment on the environmental impact study that was conducted at and the high-level recommendations? So we are actually conducting an EIR, an environmental impact report, for this project. The EIS is a federal document. I don't believe at this point that the EIR has been released. The draft document for that, for the overall seismic retrofit project, is expected, I believe, in about 12 to 18 months. So I can't speak to the high-level recommendations coming out of that right now because that document hasn't been released and hasn't been formalized. We will provide the public the opportunity to comment when the draft is available. And basically, when it is available, we will talk to the public and kind of go through some of the different conclusions that have been reached. Let's see, next question. Jean-Marie White, or Jean-Marie White. Last year, the reconstruction timeline was 5 years. Can you explain why it's now going to 9 years? I can. I think I spoke to a little bit to this on during the presentation itself. When it was 5 years, the thought was the first 2 years would be installation of a dewatering system. The next 3 would be reconstruction, well, removal and reconstruction of the embankment. Looking at the different simulations of how long it was actually going to take to construct the project, there's a critical year, which was year 4 of construction, where we were taking the dam from an interim dam height down to its clay core and back up. Conducting our analysis, we determined there was only a 5 to 25% probability of success of actually doing that in a single season. As that's the case, if we were unable to complete that successfully, we would have had a compromised dam. So we lengthened the project to between 6 and 7 years in order to ensure constructability. However, at 6 to 7 years, the environmental impact as a result of the project and the dewatering of the reservoir increased to an unacceptable level. Basically, we would have had the reservoir dewatered for 4.5 years, which had a very negative effect on the steelhead downstream. As a result, it went from 6 to 7 years all the way to 9 years in order to try to keep more water in the reservoir to minimize the impacts. As I stated earlier, with the reservoir being drained, if FERC does require that we keep it drained the whole time, the trade-off is we do have the ability to then compress the schedule back down to a shorter time frame. Since that has not been approved, we are sticking with our original schedule, but that is one of the things we'll be looking at. Let's see. Excuse me. Question from Kenneth. Given the possible 2 to 5 trillion outlay for the COVID-19 pandemic, is funding this project in jeopardy or is it certain? So Valley Water has been planning this project since 2012. As a result, we have been incorporating this into our funding scenarios. Currently, it's paid for through water rates as well as our Safe Clean Water Bond measure. The COVID-19 impacts from the pandemic will not adversely affect this funding stream. And in fact, as this project is shovel ready, if the government should choose to release an infrastructure stimulus package, this may be a project that is capable of receiving federal funds. So hopefully, if anything, the COVID issue may fiscally help the project. Excuse me again. Okay, now a question from SJC. What will the impact on traffic use of Cochrane and Magalera roads be? Time estimate of impact. Generally speaking, we had on Magalera put a system in that would have used a conveyor belt, which would have had an impact closing one lane of traffic. That system has actually been updated and we are no longer putting a conveyor system in. I expect that there will be impacts, but they won't be as severe as originally forecasted. For a better time estimate, I would have to kick it to one of our subject matter experts, and I will do that after we've gone through the questions. So I'm going to leave that on the board, and then we'll go to the next one. John Marie White, why do we need state law to make this project move forward? Did this project never stand a chance to succeed from day one? My question is, the state law is there to show what a priority this project is. FERC has indicated to us that this is their #1 priority in the nation. The Valley Water Board of Directors has also prioritized this. I don't want to say that this was never going to succeed from day one, but it is helpful to have backing at the legislative level to make sure items don't get stuck in red tape and bureaucracy. So I believe that this project can be a success. I've only been on it since about 2018, and we have seen some movement since then, so I am hopeful and optimistic we will finish as currently scheduled. Vanessa Clayton. Also, when will access to the trails on top be limited? And will the creek be cleaned out of all the down trees from the 2017 flooding? I will talk about the trails on top. So as part of the construction of the new embankment, we will be restricting access on the top of the new embankment to just county workers, district workers, basically government entities. The kind of up and down path, you kind of go in a circle right now, you come up one entrance, go over the embankment and go down another entrance. That circular path will be altered. So where you come in, you will also go out the same way. That is being done for federal safety concerns. So that probably will happen once the project is completed. However, your trail access will be immediately impacted when we start the tunnel construction. So I would say in 2021, the trails across the embankment may be closed. For the down trees, I believe that's actually a combination of the district as well as the property owners. The district does not own all of the creeks that are in the area. I believe Melanie could probably speak to the percentage that we actually own, but we do partner with municipalities that are in charge to remove those trees where possible. I know last year alone, we entered into an agreement with the city of San Jose for about $200,000 to actually take out down trees, and we have a program. So wherever possible, we are trying to remove down trees that are on our property. We're fairly responsive when it comes to that. But ultimately, there are some situations where the creek in question is on private property, and we're not allowed to enter and do that work. Jano asks, are you coordinating with the city of San Jose to clean Coyote Creek? It's full of garbage in numerous areas. I think I spoke that a little bit on that last question, and Melanie would like to speak up right now, so I'll defer to her.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Actually, our director, Esther Mira, who's on this call, met just last week with Maya Esparza, a city council meeting, regarding this very issue of cleaning up Coyote Creek. And she was specifically talking about the area near the Rock Springs area that flooded back in 2017. So we are coordinating and working with the city right now on ways to clean the garbage out. As most of you are probably aware, during this COVID situation, the cleanup of actual homeless encampments has paused because we are unable to move individuals out of areas, but we're working with the city to try to find a way to clean up all the illegal dumping and do the best we can to get the garbage cleaned up. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. I will go ahead and take that question off. Next question from Jean-Marie White. What will the risk of flooding be during the next 5 years? For people paying flood insurance, is there any material change to the risk, i.e. less risk? For the next 5 years, because that is only through construction of the Anderson Dam Tunnel project, there should be no change in the material risk and as a result, your flood insurance. Obviously, when the project is completed, that may have a beneficial effect on your insurance rates. Without knowing exactly where you live, I can't really tell you for certain, and I'm probably not the guy to tell you anyway. It should probably be our flood protection division. But at least for the next 5 years, everything should remain unchanged. S. Shipley, you mentioned 100 CFS as a flow in the winter. How low would that drop down to in summer and still keep the creek wet? The answer to that is, so the thought behind the 100 CFS net release is that we will be releasing 100 CFS through the winter until the reservoir is down at dead pool. For summer flows, generally we don't have 100 CFS going through the creek. I think the target is somewhere between 5 to 10 CFS for normal summer flows. So I would expect that that would be the target range that we could expect to see in summer. Allie, this is the first meeting that I have attended, and the first thought that came to my mind as you speak is there a vast difference between your soothing words / attentions and the real consequences, environmental and financial? I'm not sure what kind of take on that. I am confident this project will get built, and I am also confident that everyone is aware that this is a public safety issue. That is the momentum that has been built behind it. Our congressional delegation has gotten very active. At the state and federal levels, we do have people behind us pushing this project. If those are soothing words, I'm glad, because that's a reflection of what's actually going on right now. There are absolutely real consequences to a failure to execute this project in a timely manner. The first and foremost is a catastrophic failure of the dam has the ability to affect over 1 million residents. Depending on how full it was when it failed and the amount of rain coming in, you would get flows that would go all the way from Monterey Bay to the San Francisco Bay. So I don't want to downplay the criticality of getting this project done. But I am feeling good that there are enough people in the know behind this project to get it done. Demetrius, and I will not even try to pronounce your last name because I will butcher it. Since the project is starting relatively soon, has there been a decision on contractor, and when will that information be public? The design won't be complete until late July, early August. And at that point, we will start to go out to advertisement for a contractor. No contractor has been selected yet. We will be going through a public process. So when that advertisement begins, our board will be aware of it. It will go to our board meeting. They will authorize advertisement, and then we'll go through our normal award process. So you haven't missed the boat. Contractor's not on board yet, and we expect that probably late summer, early fall, a contractor will be selected. Allie, is lack of an EIR sufficient to halt construction? Absolutely. In a typical project, the lack of an EIR is critical and would potentially halt construction. But because the FERC has deemed this an emergency action, lack of an EIR is not a deal breaker here. Everything will be done on an urgency consultation basis, and the agencies that we've discussed this project with state that an EIR is not necessary to be issued before construction starts. H. Hall, will Rosden Park be closed above the reservoir? So I am unfamiliar with Rosden Park, so I really shouldn't guess, but that's never stopped me, so I will. Above the reservoir is an area that should not be impacted. I would expect the park to be open, but when our SMEs get on the call here or the Zoom meeting, they can probably give you a better answer. Okay, Swanee Edwards, how long will it take to completely dewater to 488 once it is started? I would love to give you a straight answer to that, but unfortunately, that's going to depend a lot upon precipitation. The wetter the year, the longer it'll take us. If we absolutely got no rain, I expect that we could be able to drain the reservoir down to 488 in a time period that's somewhere around 2 months or less. But I expect, and I do, knock on wood, hope that we do get rain. While it is good for construction to not get rain, it is not good for the valley as a whole. So I would like what I would call moderate rain throughout the year in a nice even fashion. Nothing that induces flooding, nothing that causes a drought, but we'll see how close I get on that. Swanee Edwards, one more question. Oh, same question. How long will it take? So it was in there twice. So There we go. Those are all the answers I have. I'm going to ask that one of our SMEs, either Victor or Yogesh or Hamong, kind of talk about what the impacts would be on Cochrane and Malaguera. Or Ball.
Any of you can unmute yourself and speak up.
Albert, I think you may need to promote some of them, unless you as attendees that they can unmute.
They are able to unmute themselves as the way that you were to earlier.
Okay, great.
So it was either Vincent, Ball, or what was the other?
Hamong or Victor, if he's online. I'm not sure that he is.
Victor is online as a panelist, and so is Ball.
Okay. Or Yogesh.
Yogesh, I think I saw on the attendees, so I will look for them to promote them.
Yeah, this is Hemang Desai here, Engineering Unit Manager for Dam Safety Group. The question was about the construction traffic on Cochrane and Malaguera. Right now, we have split the project into the tunnel construction first, followed by the full dam replacement later on. We are still evaluating the construction impact and traffic impact for the later project, the larger one, which will replace the dam. For the tunnel project, there will be some impact on both these roads, mostly in the second year of construction when we'll be bringing in concrete trucks to line the tunnel. Most of the other activities would be limited to our site itself. We expect some traffic impact, but not a lot. And right now the design team is trying to minimize those impacts too.
Thank you, Hamong. I was just alerted that Don Rocha from County Parks is actually a panelist. So he may actually have a better question on the park question than me just kind of logicking one thing or another. Don, are you available to answer that question by any chance?
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
There was a question about whether Rosden Park would be open during construction.
Yeah, so Rosenden Park will be open, although there's limited parking at the upper ends of Rosenden. So it will be limited.
Okay. Well,
But the trails will be open.
Thank you very much, Don. We did get another question from Ali. The failure analysis must have looked at many what-if scenarios, and what FERC saw is the worst-case scenario and caused this reaction. Can you share on this call what the flooding impact is when the lake is at 560? There are inundation maps that we publish. Generally, we look at a full reservoir. We have two scenarios, a fair weather, which means the reservoir is full, but it is not raining. And the FERC mandate, you're right, is worst case. It is a full reservoir with all the tributaries in the area getting drenched from rain and then a failure. For specifically at 560, I'm not sure we have run the inundation area. There were a couple different analyses done. And you know, I'm trying to think off the top of my head if we have that information published anywhere. I don't think that we do, and I will have to get back to you about whether we can create an FAQ page. But you know, that's the type of thing that we were at our restriction of 592, and that is what the kind of impact area that was originally examined was. So 560 is sort of an interim level that was directed by FERC, so we may not have the exact information on the inundation at that level. Okay. Any other questions? I don't see any hands or anything in the Q&A. Okay, then I will turn it back over to Melanie, and I will stay on this call. If anything does come up, I will be here.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. Great job in answering most of the questions. And thanks to everybody at home for joining us in this unique setting. This meeting was recorded and it will be posted to our YouTube channel in the coming days if you wish to go back and review anything that you might have missed. We also take the questions that were asked tonight, and we add them to our frequently asked questions sheet, and we post them with responses to our project page on the Valley Water website. That way everyone can review these at their leisure. If you have any further questions about the project in the coming days, please contact our neighborhood liaison, Tony Mercado, or visit district webpage and use our Access Valley Water system. Thank you very much. Stay safe and good night.